As I'm sure everyone's seen all over YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, the NDP and the Liberal government have officially broken up. They've ended their relationship, and the leader of the NDP has shredded their agreement. Now, one thing that keeps getting brought up from this is, does this mean we're going to see a snap election? And what does that mean for mortgage rates, real estate, housing, and all these other different things? My name is Miles Noack of the Noack Mortgage Team, powered by Andy Mortgage, and today we're going to take a dive into this topic to try and extrapolate what could potentially happen by looking at some historical data and things that have happened in the past. But before we get into that, if you find content like this interesting, do me that favor, hit the like and subscribe button so more people like you can see this video, and let's dive into it. The first real question is, what is a snap election? A snap election is an election that's called before the end of an actual term. So it happens before a traditional election would happen. Generally speaking, in Canada, we have an election every 4 years. However, the Prime Minister has the ability to request what's called a delusion of Parliament from the Governor General, which can speed up that process and have an election happen earlier. Snap elections are often called for strategic reasons, like when a governing body believes that they can get a larger majority, or when they think they can capitalize on favorable public opinion. They can also occur when government loses confidence in Parliament, forcing an election. While this can be an advantage to a governing party, it does have risks. It might make them look opportunistic, which could backfire politically. Now, I'm a mortgage broker, so I'm not going to touch on a lot of the political stuff, but what I am going to do is try and explain how this could impact the real estate market by sharing 6 impacts of snap elections on the real estate market. Number 1, policy uncertainty. A snap election can introduce uncertainty into the real estate market, causing buyers, sellers, and investors alike to hold off on those transactions until the end of the election so they can see the results. This uncertainty can lead to short-term slowdowns in the real estate market, causing many transactions to be postponed until election results can be clearly understood. Impact number 2, house affordability measures. Political parties frequently introduce and propose housing initiative programs during snap elections. For example, in the 2021 election, the Liberal government proposed that they were going to build 1.4 million houses, which I'm pretty sure we haven't seen yet. The Conservative government, on the other hand, said they were going to ease the stress test requirements, as well as release government real estate to try and improve and increase the housing supply. These measures can affect housing prices and demand, usually creating concern or optimism amongst buyers and investors, depending on their political opinions. The third thing we want to talk about is interest rates and monetary policy. Snap elections can often affect the stance of the Bank of Canada when it comes to interest rates. Mortgage rates have historically fluctuated during elections and generally been lower leading up to elections. For example, in the 2021 snap election, interest rates were significantly lower, which kind of helped and created almost a real estate boom in the economy. However, a new government might implement tighter monetary policy, which would impact mortgage affordability. Number 4, foreign investment regulations. Political parties may introduce stricter regulations on foreign investors to protect local buyers when it comes to real estate. For example, both the Liberal and Conservative parties proposed a temporary ban on foreign investment and foreign purchasers for 2021 to try and curb the housing demand from foreign buyers. These regulations can have a huge effect on house prices, especially in major city centers like Toronto and Vancouver. Number 5, development and infrastructure projects. Election campaigns often include pledges to invest in infrastructure as well as public transit and urban development. These infrastructure improvements can, in certain situations, push the prices of a home up by improving the neighborhood or the area, increasing the price of those homes and making them more attractive to buyers. Finally, impact number 6, regional impacts. The effects of a snap election on real estate can vary from region to region. For example, in places that have general shortages on housing supply, such as Ontario and British Columbia, you might see tighter regulations or aggressive policies to try and tackle affordability issues and things like that. This means, as a result, certain areas may react stronger depending on election outcomes. The last thing we want to talk about in this video is historical trends and long-term policy effects. Historically, real estate prices tend to surge after an election. And this is because all those delayed transactions that were kind of swept off to the side because people were too focused on the politics start to resume themselves, therefore pushing prices up. Additionally, new policies that could be introduced due to this election, such as a decrease on the mortgage stress test rate, or, for example, tax credits, could affect long-term affordability as well as market stability, depending on what rolls out. For instance, in the 2021 snap election, the proposal of lots more houses and stricter regulations on foreign investment really did have a long-lasting effect in not only house prices, but also with mortgage accessibility as well. Now, for the last part of this video, what I'm going to do is try and break down their beliefs, policies, and actions that could effectively happen depending on who gets elected in. I am going to be reading this, so I apologize. I'm not going to be looking at you, but it's really interesting information. And I think it's something that people really need to know. So let's start with the NDP. The NDP focuses on making houses more affordable for lower and middle income Canadians. Their key proposals include building affordable housing. The NDP has committed to constructing 500,000 affordable housing units over 10 years. They also want to propose things such as rent relief. They propose rental subsidies or capping rentals to ensure affordability for people who are renting. They also want to extend amortizations. The NDP has suggested reinstating a 30-year mortgage amortization for first-time homebuyers to lower monthly payments. And they also want to tackle speculation. They propose a tax on foreign buyers to address speculation and rising home prices. So, what does this all mean? Well, essentially, housing affordability. They want to build 500,000 affordable housing units over the course of 10 years. 500,000. I mean, the Liberals have been trying to build 1.4 million houses for a while. They still haven't done it. To be honest with you, I don't really think 500,000 affordable housing units across Canada as a whole is really going to crack our housing market and make things more affordable. The other thing they want to implement is rent relief. So they want to propose rental subsidies to cap rents and ensure affordability. Now, I did a video previously when it came to rent and the relationship between tenants and landlords, and I still stand by that. I really do think that the tenant and landlord relationship has gotten very sour. And if all of a sudden you cap it so that people don't want to buy rental properties anymore and don't want to have those, the big question is, where are you going to rent? Which has honestly sparked a video idea involving trying to run scenarios on what Canada would look like if all of a sudden there were no rental properties. So if that's something you're interested in, comment down below, because I'm really thinking about making that video. Now, out of the weeds and back into the, NDP and their belief on property. Extended amortizations. So as a mortgage broker, I look at amortizations a lot. And when I think of an extended amortization, like a 30-year mortgage for a first-time home buyer, there's two things that come to mind with this. One is it does technically put the bank at a higher level of risk because that mortgage is outstanding for longer, right? It's just plain and simple. The other thing I look at is, and whether we're talking about first-time home buyers, second home buyers, whatever, the longer your amortization is, yes, you're going to get a lower monthly payment, but that's not going to fix affordability in the long term. Yes, it can fix affordability sort of immediately, but at the same time, you're just putting a Band-Aid over a wound. You're just kicking the can down the road, hoping that the problem goes away. It's not going to make the general house prices decrease. And the reason for that is you're making that higher price tag more accessible to other Canadians, right? Which all in all seems like a really good idea. However, as we see that happen, so now it's like, okay, $800,000 for a starter home. That makes sense. I can do that because I can get a 30-year amortization. Well, all of a sudden, more people are going to want to buy that $800,000 house because they can all get a 30-year amortization. Couldn't that potentially increase the value or cost of that house because it's now more accessible? Now, I know accessibility is a tough thing to talk about because everyone should technically have access to housing, but I think there's other things that could be done to try and decrease the cost of that house instead of just taking longer to pay it off. On top of that, you put a 30-year amortization on a first-time homebuyer. I don't know if you've seen an amortization schedule or not, but when you start off, you pay more interest, and that decreases as you pay your mortgage down. So later on in your mortgage, you start paying more towards the principal. The thing behind this is the longer it takes you to pay the mortgage off, the more interest you're going to pay. And on top of that, generally speaking, your first-time homebuyer isn't buying their forever home. They're buying a starter home. So if they buy that starter home, and it's a 30-year amortization, they're building equity in that home slower, meaning that when they want to sell and buy something different, they have less money in their pocket, building wealth slower. So I'm not sure a 30-year amortization is really the right answer. The next thing they want to do is tackle speculation, and I kind of support this. You shouldn't have a house empty. We have a housing crisis right now. If you have an empty house, maybe think about renting it out. Now, there are some stipulations with that. Short-term rentals, which have now we'll get into that in another video. But when you think about it, it's like, okay, I've got this house and it's not rented out. I'm just going to leave it. It's just going to be empty for a year. Yeah, you should be taxed for that. I firmly believe that. I think that's a smart way to do it because it puts you in a position where all of a sudden it inspires that person to fix that property up, get it to a state where it can be sold for someone to move in, or that it can be rented out so someone can move in. So yeah, tackling speculation, I like that. I agree with that. I think that's great. The next party we're going to focus on is the liberals. Now, the liberals focus on increasing housing supply while implementing measures to ensure affordability. For example, building 1.4 million homes, the liberals plan to build or repair 1.4 million homes within 4 years. That's a lofty goal. First-time homebuyer support. They propose doubling the first-time homebuyer's tax credit to $10,000 and introducing a tax-free first home saving account, which I'm not going to lie, that account is actually pretty good. They also had some policies behind foreign ownership bans. So a 2-year ban on foreign resident ownership aims to curb demand and reduce price pressure. The other thing they look at is a home buyer's bill of rights, which would essentially ban blind bidding on homes and make inspections mandatory for buyers. So no more bidding wars where you don't know this guy offered this guy offered this. I'll go subject free. I won't get an inspection, all this stuff. They want to kind of control that. So to break these down individually, the 1.4 million homes over the course of 4 years. Now, I don't have all the details on it, but I'm pretty sure they haven't done that. And to be honest with you, that is a massively lofty goal. I mean, the NDP are talking about building 500,000 units. They're talking about 1.4 million homes. Yeah, I mean, building those houses, I think building more houses is the key. I mean, we have a supply and demand issue where we don't have enough supply to meet the demand. So building more houses seems like the right idea. However, you just have to do it a bit more strategically and maybe stick to your guns when you say you're going to build 1.4 million houses. Just a thought. The first time homebuyer support stuff. So the tax credit, that's fantastic. I think that's good. And then that home savings account for first time homebuyers, absolutely fabulous. It's basically an RRSP that you can build up that you don't have to pay back. So there's lots of tax implications there. If you are a first time homebuyer and you're thinking about opening an account like this, talk to your accountant. It's a great account. It's awesome. I've seen customers use it. It works really nicely. I'm a big fan. I love it. I think it's great. The ban on foreign ownership. This is a tough one. I don't want to say we should ban foreign people from buying houses. I don't like the way that's worded. But at the same time, we did see an influx of foreign buyers, which did push price pressure up. So something needed to be done. And, maybe a short-term ban on it until we get house prices back down is not necessarily a bad idea. The one thing with that is these people coming into the country, if they're not going to buy a house, chances are they're going to rent a house. And that could potentially push up the cost of rentals. So, instead of pushing up house prices and mortgage payments, we're pushing up the cost of renting. And I don't know how you tackle that. I really don't. But it's definitely something that needs to be looked at and maybe dissected a little more than just, nope, no more foreign buyers for 2 years. That's the fix. Maybe go a little bit deeper and do a bit more diving into that and try and find some better solutions, I guess. I don't know. The home buyer's bill of rights. This one's interesting to me. So to set out a home buyer's bill of rights, I find that really unique in the mentality that, just talking from experience. When me and my wife bought our house, it was listed on Friday. We saw it the Friday, had to have a subject-free offer in above list on Monday. It was brutal. Now, granted, the people we bought from, lovely human beings. They even took a hit for us so that we could get this house because we wanted to start our family in it. There's a cherry tree with a swing. It's awesome. However, putting this Bill of Rights in is a unique proposal, and I kind of agree with it. I think you should be able to see if there's a house and it's listed at $800,000 and someone's put an offer in at $850,000, $875,000 because that's what they're willing to pay. Maybe the person saying, I've got the ability to buy for 810, then they don't have to waste their time. They don't have to go into this hoping that it can happen. And especially in situations where you've got subject-free offers, so home inspection, appraisals, and things like that, where you don't have the time to do that. To me, putting this in place would allow someone to look and be like, well, someone's offered $875. I can't do that. Okay, on to the next one. It just saves time for everyone, makes things a little bit easier, and might be able to streamline the process. It also makes a lot more transparency available. Now, making home inspections mandatory might not be a popular opinion, but I think that's a good idea. I think you should have to get an inspection on a home. Yes, it costs you $600. Yes, it's going to take time. Yes, they're going to find things that you didn't want to know about in the house. But at the end of the day, if you get that home inspection, you're going to know what needs to be done with the house so you can improve those so that you can build wealth and equity in the property. But on top of that, it protects you from buying a house that could cost you lots of money down the road. I'm a big fan of inspections. I've never bought a house without one, and I don't intend on doing it. Even when me and my wife bought this one, I called in a favor and had an inspection done on the weekend as well as an appraisal. Even though I didn't have the conditions for that when I put my offer in, I knew the house was livable, I knew everything was good with it, and I knew the value was good as well. So I'm a big fan of inspections and appraisals and things like that. Should they be mandatory? In my opinion, yeah, probably. It would protect a lot of people. The next party we're going to talk about, and the last one, is the Conservatives. The Conservative Party emphasizes supply-side solutions to address housing shortages, increasing supply by releasing federal land. They propose releasing 15% of federal government. Wow, that's a tough one to say. Holy. Honestly, some of these are hilarious. Legal drop-down's great. They propose releasing 15% of federal government-owned real estate for housing development. They also want to ease the mortgage stress test. Conservatives advocate releasing the stress test, especially for renewing mortgages. They also want to provide incentives for developers, offering tax incentives to developers such as deferred capital gains tax to encourage construction. Foreign ownership restrictions. See, conservatives and liberals, not so different. Similar to the liberals, they propose a 2-year ban on foreign home ownership to try and, combat house prices. So let's break these down individually. Increasing supply by releasing federal land. You know what? Sure, it would help. You release the supply, you would free up that land for development. So developers would come in, build the houses, build the buildings, build what needs to be done. It's going to provide them the ability to hire people, so it could increase jobs and all these other different things. And of course, those buildings would then be taxed. So if you build a bunch of houses, each of those houses has property tax, which is paid to the municipality and all the other stuff like that. Yeah, I think it could work. I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. Easing the mortgage stress test. So this one's unique because it's talking about especially for renewals on mortgages. When we talk about the stress test, when it first came out, everyone was up in arms, including myself. I was not a fan. But then again, people who were getting mortgage rates of, let's say, 2.5% had to qualify at 5.45% because it's 5.45% or contract plus 2, whichever is greater. So it put people in a position where when you bought a house, if interest rates went up, you knew you could still afford that house, which is kind of worked out a little bit right now. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but rates have gone up dramatically. And considering people qualified at 5.24%, I think it was, it helps. It gives you that buffer. And it just kind of puts you in a position where you can handle those higher payments because that counts towards your debt servicing ratio. So let's say we're spending 39% of our sort of annual income on principal, interest, taxes, heat, and condo fees if applicable. We know that that's based on like 5% plus. So you've got some wiggle room. I think it's really helpful in the fact that it prevents a lot of foreclosures, for sales, and stuff like that. It just gives a level of protection. It also kind of puts you in a position where you can't buy the biggest house you want. If you want to buy a house for $800,000, you qualify at 2.5%, 3%, but you don't qualify at 5%, you have to move on. You can't buy that house. Now, for renewals, I think it's a bit more unique. So when you renew for a mortgage, generally speaking, you're just going to sign a renewal agreement, send it back to your lender, or you're going to talk to a mortgage advisor or a mortgage broker to compare what's available on the market for you. And they're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff and say, hey, look, this is here, this is that, this is this, and you pick which one you want to go with. Now, when it comes to mortgage renewals and the stress test, the only time it applies is if you're looking to move lenders. And generally speaking, if we're looking to move lenders, we have to requalify under the stress test. Should that be there? Well, with mortgage renewals and when you move them, you generally have a term that is, let's just say 5 years, for example, or 7 years. That means in 5 years or 7 years, that mortgage is going to come up for renewal at market rates. That means the renewal agreement is going to be generally at market rates, maybe less a little bit of a discount. So should we be free from the stress test when we move our mortgage to a new lender? I don't think so. Might not be a popular opinion, but I really don't. I think we should stress test people. Now, should we kind of ease on the stress test a little bit now that rates are starting to come down? Maybe. Maybe we could see some easing on it. I think that would be beneficial as well. But at the same time, if we ease that stress test, very similar to adding 30-year amortizations, it's just kicking the can down the road. It's not making the purchase price of that property decrease, it's just making it so everyone can access it, right? So in the short term, yes, it works, but in the long term, I really don't think it will. So that's a bit of a tough one to talk about. The solution to it, I'm not sure. I think the stress test has worked quite well and done what it needed to do. Could it be tweaked at this point? I think so. Yeah, absolutely. But should we just abolish it? No, I don't think that's the right thing to do. We're not like the United States where you have a 25-year mortgage that you have the same rate for 25 years. We have short terms, which potentially puts people at risk as rates go up, but potentially also gives benefit as they come back down. So I think the stress test is something that should stay. It should just maybe be tweaked a bit. God, I hope that didn't just everything up, because I have been recording for like 45 minutes. This is the longest recording I have ever done. The next thing we want to talk about is incentives for developers. As mentioned multiple times, I firmly believe we have a supply and demand issue. So more developers, more development, more construction. I'm into it. I like the idea of it. I think that could potentially lower the cost or the price of a home because all of a sudden we're not having 2-3 buyers to one listing. Now, in this market we're in right now, it's a little bit different, seeing as, we've seen prices come down. There's a fair bit more listings. There's a little bit of lack of confidence in, Canadian banking and the Bank of Canada and all this stuff. But I still think more development is a really good idea for Canada and can have a drastic impact on the housing supply and the cost of purchasing a home. Now, for the foreign ownership restrictions, pretty sure we already talked about this one with the Liberal Party, so we're going to kind of let that one slide and let what I said before stand. So with this, each party is relatively unique when it comes to their opinions and what they want to do for Canadian real estate to try and help with affordability and stuff like this. So at this point, to summarize this very long video, we've gone through what a snap election is, the 6 effects it can have on the real estate market and mortgage market, and what the political parties intend to do or could possibly do if they get elected. We also looked at some historical data, and I feel like at this point, if there was a snap election, it could have some very large effects on our real estate market, as well as the mortgage rates and things along those lines. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're still with me, I really appreciate it. My name's Miles Noack of the Noack Mortgage Team. If you got value out of this video, or if you like this content, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.